Would you believe me if I told you that the average person dreams 4 to 6 times a night, lasting for around 2 hours each? How many times have you woken up from a dream and it felt so real that even waking up was a shock? Today, we're taking a trip back to the 1800s, to the county of Suffolk, where a young woman walked into a red-painted barn in the countryside, completely unaware that she would never leave. For nearly a year, her family would receive letters detailing her life, current affairs, how she was happy, married, and living in another part of the country. Until one day, her stepmother had a disturbing dream. Not once, not twice, but over and over again. The dreams were brutal, they were disturbing, they were critical to unearthing the truth. The events that followed would go down in history for people across the country, and to this day stands tall as one of the most legendary murder mysteries Great Britain has ever seen. A tale of lies and deceit, of dreams and the supernatural, of a woman who followed a man to her end and a man whose skin was used to bind a book, detailing the events I'm about to relay. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is William and welcome to the Baker Street Bureau, the place where we dive into the strange, dark and mysterious goings-on in British history, and this is the case of Maria Marten and the Red Barn murder. Our story unfolds in the quiet Suffolk village of Polstead. Today, Polstead is home to a population of around 1,000 people. It's quiet, quaint, and rich in old buildings. The church dates back to the 12th century, and its spire is the only original one in Suffolk. Outside of the church and the single pub, the Cock Inn, there's not really much there. In the 1820s, Polstead was much the same. A small, agricultural and deeply British village. It was the kind of place where no one locked their doors. No one's business was everyone's business. Everyone knew everyone, therefore secrets and scandal were whispered in the pews, and all of your gossip would travel quickly across the hedgerows and harvest fields. Your reputation was one of the most important things, and if you managed to become a trusted member of the community, you had power. Standing just outside the village was a timber farm building known locally as the Red Barn, named after its distinctive red clay-tiled roof. It was isolated, private, and soon infamous. Maria Marten was born in 1801, the daughter of Thomas Marten, who was the local mole catcher. Now, bearing a child outside of wedlock in that time period was a life-altering scandal. Maria had two, by different fathers in the village, which, unfortunately but expectedly, had marked her social standing permanently. Despite the controversy, Maria suffered tragedy when one of the children died as an infant. The father of that child was a man named Thomas Corder, the son of a local farmer and the older brother of another key figure in this story, William Corder. William was a charming, educated and ambitious young man. He was also given the nickname of Foxy, as his natural gift of confidence and charisma had led him down a path of a fraudster and a ladies' man. Sources state that William once stole and sold one of his father's own pigs and went on to cash in a forged cheque for £93. Now, for context, the average yearly wage in that time was between £40 and £50. I'll let you do the scaling maths. William had also helped a fellow thief called Samuel Smith steal a pig from a neighbouring village. Now, when questioned by police, Smith had said that I'll be damned if he will not be hanged some of these days. In response to his wicked ways, William was sent to live in London in disgrace, but was tragically recalled home sometime later after his older brother Thomas drowned crossing a frozen lake. William's father and 3 brothers all died within 18 months of each other, leaving only himself and his mother to run the farm. William's shining reputation as a ladies' man had put him on a path to meet Maria. Now, William wished to keep his relationship with her a secret, as attaching himself to a woman marked with scandal would in turn pass that mark on to him. This became impossible to hide, as Maria had given birth to their child in 1827 at the age of 25 years old. Maria believed that she and William should marry and start a new chapter, when tragically, the child died. Now, later reports suggest that the child may have been murdered. But despite this, William had agreed to marry Maria. That summer, in the presence of Maria's stepmother Anne, William suggested that the two should meet at the Red Barn, where he proposed they should elope to Ipswich. There were rumours that the parish officers were planning to prosecute Maria for having children out of wedlock. A chance for a fresh start. Somewhere no one knew their past. They could at last live in peace. William had set the date that the two would make their getaway. However, when the time came, he stalled. He pushed the date back in which they should elope to the following evening, where he was inevitably delayed again. Now, sources indicate that William said that his brother was unwell, which is why the planned escape was pushed back. This was a lie. On Friday, the 18th of May, 1827, William turned up at Maria's cottage and suggested that the two make haste, as supposedly the local constable had finally obtained a warrant to arrest Maria. This was also a lie. Maria was rightfully afraid. However, William suggested that she dress in men's clothing so that they could slip out in a disguised fashion. He would carry her things to the Red Barn, where she could change before continuing on to Ipswich. Half a mile up the road from Maria's family cottage, situated on Barnfield Hill, was the Red Barn. Maria left her home and her family. She was never seen again. Sometime later, William would return, and when questioned by family, said that Maria was in Ipswich and the surrounding areas. He claimed that he couldn't bring her back yet as his wife, for fear of provoking anger from his family and his friends. Maria's family put unyielding pressure on him, as they were desperate to see her. Eventually, he left the area and went on to write letters to Maria's family, claiming that she was happy, married, and living on the Isle of Wight. She had given various excuses via the letters as to her lack of communication, citing illness, that she'd hurt her hand, or that she had previously written, and yet the letters must have gotten lost in the post. Maria's family grew more suspicious that something was wrong. Anne, her stepmother, started talking about dreams that she had been having. Dreams in which Maria was being murdered. Dreams in which Maria was buried in the Red Barn. Dreams that, unfortunately, became reality. Anne managed to convince her husband, Maria's father, to at least investigate the dreams. He went to the Red Barn and dug into the storage bins. He quickly uncovered human remains wrapped in a sack. The body was badly decomposed, as quite some time had passed. However, thanks to a few telltale characteristics, such as her hair, clothing, and a missing tooth, the body was quickly identified. It was Maria. But how did they link William to the crime? It was clear that Maria had died long before William had returned to the village, stating that she was alive and well. It was also discovered that around the neck of Maria's body was a green handkerchief that belonged to William. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that the infamous liar, criminal, and all-around bad dude, William Corder, was responsible. All they had to do was find him. The local parish constable, known as Ayers, had managed to obtain his old address from a friend and enlisted the help of an officer called James Lee from the London police. Now, if you've heard the name James Lee before, he would go on to be the leading investigator in the case of Spring-Heeled Jack. They had tracked William down to a place called Everley Grove House, a boarding house for ladies in Brentford, that he was running with his wife. His wife, Mary Moore, had replied to a Lonely Hearts advert that William had placed in the Times, which some sources say had reached over 100 replies. Now, Judith Flanders, author of The Invention of Murder, states that he also placed adverts in the Morning Herald and the Sunday Times, which received many more replies that had never been collected. These letters were published by George Foster in 1828 in a book called The Authentic Particulars of William Corder. The police managed to enter the boarding house under the guise that Officer Lee wanted to board his daughter there. As he entered the parlour, stood in a dressing gown, boiling an egg, surrounded by 4 ladies, was William. After his arrest, police searched the property and found a French passport implying that William was once again planning on fleeing, but this time further afield. They also found a pair of pistols that he supposedly purchased on the day of the murder, and also some letters, which may or may not have contained warnings that they'd discovered Maria and were actively hunting him. William was taken back to Suffolk and tried at Shire Hall in Bury St Edmunds. The trial was supposed to start on the 7th of August, 1828. However, due to the amount of notoriety that the case had built, it was forced to be delayed. Hotels had sold out rooms as people travelled far and wide to view the trial, and admittance to the trial was only possible by ticket due to the large number of people trying to get in. The proceedings were led by a man called William Alexander, the chief baron of the Exchequer. Now, Maria's exact cause of death could not be established. However, it was thought that her eye socket had been struck with a sharp instrument, potentially William's short sword that he carried proudly. However, the counter-argument stated that the wound could have been caused by accident by Maria's father when he was digging through the barn without knowing that there was a body there. Strangulation could not be ruled out either due to the discovery of William's handkerchief around Maria's neck. To further add to the confusion, wounds on the body suggested that she may have also been shot. The final conclusion was drawn with the evidence presented. William was charged with the murdering of Maria Marten by feloniously and willfully shooting her with a pistol through the body, and likewise stabbing her with a dagger. To avoid the chance of a mistrial, William was indicted on 9 charges, including a previous forgery charge. Maria's stepmother was called to the stand to give evidence of the events that led up to Maria's disappearance, as well as the dreams that she later had. Maria's father, Thomas, then told the court how he dug up his daughter. And Maria's 10-year-old brother, George, revealed that he'd seen William with loaded pistols before the alleged murder and later witnessed him leaving the barn with a pickaxe. Lee, the police officer that apprehended William, gave his evidence around his arrest and the objects discovered during the search of his house. The prosecution drew the conclusion that William had no intention on marrying Maria. She had extensive knowledge of William's criminal dealings, which had ultimately given her power over him. Now, with the kind of person that William has been painted as, we can assume that this would have caused him great distress, as he had to be in control of almost every situation. After all of this, it was time for William to tell his version of events. He admitted to being in the barn with Maria, but he left because they'd had an argument. He claimed that he then heard a pistol shot whilst walking away, implying that Maria had inflicted it upon herself. He ran back in and found her dead, with one of the pistols laying beside her. William pleaded with the jury to give him the benefit of the doubt before they retired to discuss the verdict. A mere 35 minutes had passed before they returned to deliver. William was found guilty. Baron Alexander said, that you be taken back to the prison whence you came, and that you be taken from thence on Monday next to a place of execution, and that you there be hanged by the neck until you are dead, and your body shall afterwards be dissected and anatomized. And may the Lord God Almighty of his infinite goodness have mercy on your soul. Damn. William spent the next 3 days in prison deciding whether or not to attempt to make peace with God. He finally confessed to his wife after several meetings with the prison chaplain, although his confession didn't quite line up with the charges, as he strongly denied stabbing Maria, but claimed that he had shot her in the eye after they argued. On the 11th of August 1828, William was escorted to the gallows in Bury St Edmunds, apparently too weak to stand without help. He was hanged shortly before noon in front of a crowd of thousands. When the hood was drawn over his head, William said, "I am guilty. My sentence is just. I deserve my fate, and may God have mercy on my soul." The body was then taken to the courtroom at Shire Hall, where it was cut open along the abdomen to expose the muscles. Crowds poured in to observe, and people kept coming to see the body well into the evening. The following day, the dissection and post-mortem were carried out in front of an audience of students and physicians at Cambridge University. Reports state that a galvanic battery had been purchased from Cambridge, and it is likely that the group experimented with galvanism on the body. The battery was attached to the limbs and was used to demonstrate the contraction of muscles. The most interesting thing to come out of this process, in my opinion, was the examination of his skull. They discovered that he had quite extensive development in the areas of secretiveness, acquisitiveness, destructiveness, amongst other things. Several copies of his death mask were made, and replicas are held at Moyses Hall Museum and in the dungeons of Norwich Castle. William's skin was tanned by Surgeon George Creed and used to bind an account of the murder. The book, together with another, are also held at the museum. Last year, a second book was discovered at Moyses Hall Museum. This copy was apparently donated decades ago and utilized William's skin in the bindings and the edges. Let's pause for a second here, because that's wild. The written accounts of the incident were bound by his skin. As always, after the fact, some spicy rumors began to emerge. Doubts about both the story of Anne's dreams and the fate of William and Maria's child surfaced. Anne was only a year older than Maria, and it was suggested that she and William were having an affair, and that the two had planned the murder and to dispose of Maria, so it could continue without any intervention. Anne's dreams had started shortly after William had been married to his new wife, suggesting that this could have been a jealousy-driven plot. The rumours around the death of William and Maria's child also flared up. Both of them claimed that they had taken the child to be buried in Sudbury. However, there are no records of the burial, and there are no trace of the child's burial site. But how did this case get so popular? What caused it to become such a media circus? It had all of the elements to make it a gripping case to the public. The devious, dastardly villain and the poor innocent girl. An iconic murder scene. The supernatural element in Anne's dreams. The fact that William had started a new life off the back of a Lonely Hearts advert. The popularity of the case spawned several books, stage dramas, penny dreadfuls, and even films. Artifacts from the case, trial, and execution ended up fetching a price on the black market, as people were so keen to get hold of a piece of history. The case became one of the first true crime media frenzies in British history, and nearly 2 centuries later, the case still lingers in British folklore because at its heart, it is incredibly unsettling. A disappearance covered by lies. A deadly truth hidden beneath the floorboards. And a woman who said she knew because she saw it in her sleep. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is William, and this is the Baker Street Bureau. If you've made it this far through the video, thank you so much. Now, this is the point where I ask you guys to leave me a comment with any interesting cases, mysteries, occult, paranormal, anything back through British history that you find interesting, that you think I might, and I'll take a look at it. Also, if you enjoyed the video, please click the like button and don't forget to subscribe. And wherever you are in the world, I bid you a good morning, good evening, and good night.